Howdy Bubs and welcome back. Today we'll be jumping back into GameMaker and exploring how to add in signposts or ways to have text appear within the game to help guide your player in their journeys. So starting off, I've created two new sprites. S marker, this is going to serve as a little piece that connects to our signpost and then to the actual text box that will appear. Create this, it's simple. I have the origin point slightly above it because I just want to layer the two of them on top of each other so it's a seamless merge. Then I've created what will serve as my signpost. I'm just going to have a floating book. With these two parts in play, we can go ahead and jump into the next component and check out how the objects will work for this. We'll be creating two objects and a font in this case. First, I'm just going to go ahead and create a font. So right click on font, create font, F sign. This will be the font for the signs that I have. I had played around with Papyrus before. It gives a nice like text or handwritten text feel. So now I have my font. I can close this out and move on to creating our first object. Our first object is going to be a simple one. This object is going to be create object and our sign, O sign. The sign is going to be with the sprite, in my case my book. I'm going to add in a key event, key press. I'm going to specify what key needs to be pressed by the user to interact with it. I am going to use the letter F. When they press F, they will interact with this to display text. This portion of code is going to address first if the player is close, if point in circle, I'm just going to do a circle around it and check if OPlayer.x, let's increase this a bit, if OPlayer.x and OPlayer.y are close to the x and y values of our book, in my case, within 64 pixels, then I want to have some type of interaction. But also, I need to make sure that there is not already a text box appearing. OText. We're going to create OText in a bit. If the player is within 64 pixels of our book, which I have the origin in the center, then with we're going to instance underscore create layer, and I'm going to create in the x and y position minus 64, so 64 pixels above my current position, and layer, the current layer, I'm going to have OText appear. And I'm going to modify a few things. The text is going to be equal to other.text, whatever the text we have, it will grab that. Then it will have its length be equal to the string underscore length of our text. With our O camera, I'm going to set the focus on the text equal to other.id. This will ensure the camera focuses on text. So now if the player is close and text box doesn't already exist, we create the text box and grab the text and the length based off of the text. immediately and focus the camera on our text. Well, what is our text? This is supposed to belong in our sign, but right now we don't have any variables to address that. We need to add in and introduce a new concept, variable definitions. In here, we actually can create variables unique to an individual instance, but give them default values here at the start. Here, I'm going to create the variable text. I need to change this to be a string, and I'm going to change this to default message. And close quotation mark. So now when this is here, the text it's looking for will be pulled from this variable. I'll demonstrate this later once we have oText set up. And the last thing, just for my case, you of course don't need this. In my step event, I will have my book floating. And that will just be pulling from our pickup and place it in here. I like the idea of my book floating being somewhat magical. And so now our book will simply float up and down. That closes off our sign, but we have other work to deal with in terms of creating the rest of the code, in this case our text. The text is the largest part, that's why I wanted to save it for last. We can go ahead and create a new object. This will be oText. In oText we're going to have a create event, and this create event is going to establish a lot of our basic variables. Here, this is just initializing, and we're going to have our speed, char speed, the speed of our characters as they appear, 0.25. This is going to be in characters per frame, or step, really, it's more appropriately step. Next we have letters, which is of course the number of letters we currently have. Text, which I set to default just for the moment. And length, which we have calculated to be string underscore length of text, which we of course update whenever we pass in a new value. It immediately gets updated there. What is our current text? Text underscore current is set to nothing. Our width is 0, our height is 0, our border is 10 pixels, and finally the font. What font are we going to use? Of course we're going to be using F sign. This initializes everything, but we need to use that. That will bring us into our step event. This will actually address building the text. It's not going to draw it yet, that'll be our draw event. Now let me go ahead and add our draw event in here and maximize this view so we can focus on everything right now. In our step event, building up the text, our letters, how many letters are we going to add to this plus equals our char speed. Our text current is going to be based off of string underscore copy of our text 1, the index, and floor from there all the way up to, and rounding down, the current number of letters that we have. This means the text will actually slowly appear. This is why we have this. It's not going to all immediately display right then and there. It will instead slowly come up character by character in a more dramatic fashion. You of course can change how quickly it appears by modifying the char speed. Now that that is set, we can go ahead and set draw set font to make sure it is using the font that we have created, because different font has different sizes, and so that impacts the rest of our calculations. If our height is equal to 0, that tells us we have yet started. Our height instead is going to be string underscore height of our text. Our width then is simply the calculation of string underscore width of the text current. The last part is destroy after done and character presses any key. Or I should say player presses any key. If letters are greater than or equal to length, meaning that we've finished the message, and the keyboard underscore check if pressed of virtual key any key. So if any key whatsoever has been pressed after the text has completed, it will then destroy our object. But we need to make sure we do one thing here. Now, camera needs to be updated to now follow player. Because remember, in our sign, whenever we first interact with it, press F, it creates the text box. The focus for the camera shifts over to the text box. This tells the camera to go back to the player. And then we destroy ourselves. Instance underscore destroy. And that closes off the step event. This builds the text, sets the font, determines the height and width, and sets it up so that way we can destroy it when we're done. Let's go over and actually draw it. This portion gets a little bit more complicated. Draw text. So what goes into drawing the text? We need to create a couple of temporary variables, actually just one, just for the sake of not having to write this over and over again, is simply equal to half width is simply equal to width divided by 2. So I don't have to deal with typing out width divided by 2 over and over again. Half width is a variable. Variables exist only within the scope of the individual event, and then they get wiped, so that way it's not holding it on to for future memory. Then we draw the box. Well, what is the box? I need to draw set color, and I want this to be a black box, which is why marker is also black. Draw set alpha. It's going to be slightly transparent, half as transparent, and we're going to draw a round rectangle. It's going to be at the current X position minus half width minus border being 10 pixels that we set earlier. The Y value is going to be minus height minus border times 2. That gives us a little extra padding. I'm going to push this to the next line just to make it easier to follow along with. That's the top left corner. We need the bottom right corner next. X plus half width plus border, that moves it to the other side, and then finally Y. Then you specify in here the radius X, radius Y for the little rounded corners, and do we have an outline? I'm going to set this to false. There we go, we have the top left corner, bottom right corner, the radius for the little rounded bits, and that builds us a box. I draw sprite. This is going to actually grab our S marker and subimage 0 and at our X and Y position. This will grab the marker and kind of form a little line underneath it, or triangle, that should connect with the book to have the text appear like it's coming from our signpost, or in my case, my floating book. Then draw set alpha to 1, so that way it's no longer transparent. Then the last part is the easiest part, drawing the text itself. So there's a couple of things we need to set before we jump into this. Draw set color. I want my text to be white. Draw set horizontal alignment. This sets it so that way we center it on our X value. Draw set vertical alignment, and setting it to top will ensure that at this point that we define the text is that is the top of the text, so it'll build down from there. And then finally, actually tell it to draw text. It's going to be drawing an X value, drawing the text at the X and Y, minus the height, minus the border, so it'll slightly modify itself as is necessary, and text underscore current, whatever our current text is. This should wrap up everything that we need. So before I have anything set, let me close out of this. Now in the room, we can go ahead and place a sign. Let's see, where does it look good? Maybe I'll place another layer. Rename this to be sign. And I want the player to be above it. No, I want the sign to be in front of the player. No, the player in front of the sign. And in this layer, I can place my sign. Now, I had mentioned before that the variable actually allows us to have each instance have a different value. But how do we modify these? I have two signs right here. I'm going to go into this and go to variables, and I can edit what this message says. Here, I can change this from being default message to be welcome to level 1. And there we go, that's good. And I can go to this one, edit this one's variables. And this one says pick up parts to heal. And if you think your message is a little too long, rather than making your little text box be wider and wider, you can use the \n to go to the next line. And so it says pick up parts to heal yourself. Maybe I'll push the heal to the other line as well. And so pick up hearts to \n, heal yourself. Now I can run this, go back into my little world. I can press F, welcome to level 1. Come here, pick up hearts to heal yourself. And there we go. So if we want to edit this so that way we can close the gap between our sign and the actual message, we can do that in our O sign. I'm going to reduce it down to 32 and see how that looks. So our little magical book is floating. I can press F, and there we go. It's a much nicer distance. Though I do think my health bar might actually be a little too high, that I'm going to reduce that portion. But that's neither here or there. That's a separate component to the game. This gets us a nice completion for our text box. Now we can create little signs that inform the player different details, such as picking up hearts to heal yourself, or welcoming them to level 1. But that's how you can get that done. Again, we simply created a font, a sign object with set variable definitions, and I made mine float. You don't have to make yours. Created oText with a create, a step, and a draw event to help build everything together so that we are able to create in our little game rooms signs that we can interact with. Remember, in the rooms, you can change these messages by left clicking on here, hitting variables, and swapping them to whatever new message you want. Otherwise, that's all I've got for today. If you have any questions, just let me know in class. Otherwise, everyone have a good one. I just wanted to say thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Shout out to my bad bubs, my top 5, my day ones. Y'all have always been there for me. Next up, my baby bubs, the next 5. I always love y'all's support. And finally, for everyone else, any little bit helps. Thank you to all my basic bubs for supporting me along my journey. If you want to continue receiving notifications, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell button.